Next up is the setup for the Astronaut, and here is the model I am going to use. Unfortunately, I cannot share this one with you because it was a purchased model from this particular user on CG Trader. He has several models similar to this one, and if you guys follow pages like mine on Instagram or similar, you would have seen several of these astronauts in different animations. Particularly this one here, the Mercury astronaut, is quite popular. Anyway, I was using the Interstellar one, and we are going to upload this to Mixamo and rig it, animate it, and bring it into Cinema4D. So let's see how that works. This is a version without the materials, which we can always reapply later, but we're going to file and export this. It needs to be an FBX file for Mixamo to be able to recognize it. Let's click OK, and we can save this anyway. I've done this before, so I'm just gonna cancel that, go back up to Mixamo. And by the way, if you don't have models of your own, once you log into Mixamo, you can go to the characters section and maybe just try out some of these other ones just for experimenting with. And then when you know how to do this, you can then try with some custom models. So Mixamo isn't just a library of animations. You can also have some characters, although I don't know why that's not changing. Okay, I just had to refresh. So this is a pretty cool looking sci-fi one that maybe you guys could try out this animation with. But we are going to upload our own character. Let's just post that here. It's going to take a couple of minutes to process. And this model in particular is very well made. The mesh isn't too dense. It's detailed in all the right places and very optimized. And also it's in a fairly neutral pose, which is going to help with the rigging process in Mixamo. So when you're looking out for characters, you want to make sure that the meshes are not too dense and that the poses that you get them in are neutral enough to where Mixamo is going to be able to rig on top of that. So this would take a moment to load. Once it's uploaded, it's going to open up this auto rigger window, and this first section allows you to change the orientation of the character if maybe it came in wrong, but it should be from the front like this. Let's click next, and in this section we are going to help Mixamo identify the body parts on this character. So the chin just somewhere near the face, where the chin might be, and the wrists in this case are here. It's symmetrical, so it's going to line up the other side automatically, but if your character isn't symmetrical, you can untick this and place the individual size one at a time. But we are going to keep it symmetrical on this one. Next are the elbows. Let's put them roughly where they look like they should be, and then the knees and the groin. And when everything is all set up, we can just click next. It's going to take about 2 minutes to process once again. So just give it a moment. So after a while, it's going to be rigged, and if everything has worked, your character is going to be moving around like this. We can click next, so we can apply some preset animations onto this. And the one we want is called flying. So if I search for that, it's this one right there. It flies away from the center of the scene. We want it to be in place. There's an option for that here. Now if I hit play, we see it stays in place. This is useful because we can then animate it to move in our scene. however we want, but we do want the animation or the motion of the hands and legs and so on. The awareness control is going to change how much the character is looking around. So something like that. I think about 25 should be fine. The arms can also be changed around. You could fly like Superman, for example, but I prefer this pose here. There is some weirdness going on with the oxygen pack. It's getting squished, so we are going to have to fix that in Cinema4D. But that's okay. The overdrive just controls the general speed of the animation. Let's go for 25, something a bit slower. And character arm space, you can imagine what that does. I'm going to keep that at neutral 50 though. Okay, and once we are happy with all these parameters, we can download the character. It's going to be at 24 FPS. That's the only thing I'm going to change here. And then download the animation. And this is it right here. I'm going to drag it to Cinema4D. And it thinks about it for a few moments, but it shouldn't take too long. And here we go. It's the same character even with the materials that were applied before. So if we want to combine this with the textures that it came with, we can still use these materials and load the textures into that. In the actual final example, I didn't use the textures from the model. I just created this super shiny material so that I would reflect the wormhole around onto the model. We don't need this camera there. Let's get rid of that. Press S with all of this selected to frame it again. And one of the things we want to do is attach the astronaut to the same spline in the other scene so we can animate him going down the wormhole. So that would be on a null object, which I'm going to move up to where the astronaut is, and then taking everything and placing it under this, we could then attach the align to spline tag onto the null object. But look what happens when I move or scrub anyway in the timeline. This is going to jump immediately to away from where the null object was placed. That's because the Y position on this Mixamo rig is keyframed. So whatever we try to do, that value is always going to be relative to the parent object. So in order for this to stay where we want, we are going to have to remove the keyframes from that particular track. So just right click, animation, and delete track. It's not like this is moving up and down any considerable amount anyway, so let's just get rid of it and make our life a bit easier. So now I could take these out of here and create a null object, leave it at the floor level, go to this and zero out the Y position, place it into the null, and now you see that it stays in the same spot. I also noticed that between uploading and re-downloading this from Mixamo, it changed the scale of the astronaut. So this is a 2-meter cube, and you see the astronaut is huge compared to this. So we need to scale the scene down. Press Ctrl D to bring up the project settings and scale project. We can put the current scale as 10. And then the target scale as 1. So it's going to scale this down by a factor of 10, or an effective scale of 0.1. If I click OK, it's going to shrink it down to size. And now compared to a 2-meter cube, you see the relative scale is much more correct here. This is supposed to be about 6 feet tall, and that's a bit better. It also means that if we copy this out of this scene, so edit and copy, let's call it Astro first of all, and then go to window and go back to our other project, edit and paste. Let's look out of this camera, and the astronaut is somewhere in the center of the scene, which is right there. Okay, we can disable this cloner for a moment so we can see where the scene starts. This is the right scale I had in mind for the astronaut to be compared to the wormhole that he's going to be flying through. So he needs to be animated along the same spline. I'm actually going to move him back to that 0 point again. And let's create another null object. Call this one Astro Move and place the astronaut null into that. So we have nested this twice. And you will see why that's important shortly, because when I attach another align to spline tag to the astronaut move object and use the same spline as the camera, so we can put that in here and tick tangential once again. It's facing the wrong direction clearly here. Let's just animate the position. So at frame 0, 0%, except we need to make sure we are at frame 0. Frame 0 is going to be 0%, and 480, which would be 20 seconds. This should only be 16 seconds. So that's a mistake I made somewhere. Let's go to 16 seconds and set the position to 100% and keyframe that, so that's way down there somewhere. Let's go to window and timeline dope sheet, and this new align to spline, we want to make sure that is linear too. We still have the old camera spline, and by the way, we should name these so it's easy to identify. If you click the tab, you can actually go to the basic tab and name it so you know what it's supposed to be. So this is Astronaut. If we scrub back to the beginning, we can see that first frame is still broken, but from frame 1, it's the right way, except it's just backwards. So that's why I nested this twice, because I know I want to be able to change the direction the astronaut is facing just by changing this value. And the main null object is still facing and going along that spline. So that's the kind of thing we get. We don't need this old camera anymore. That was just to demonstrate and set up the loop. We are going to create a new camera behind the astronaut. Let's get the camera and look through it. Place it underneath the Astro Move null object so that when we play this, it's going to follow the astronaut at the same rate. We just need to change the relative position to the astronaut. So on this, in the coordinates, the X position is going to be 0, so it's right down the middle. No heading rotation and no banking. Let's go to the object tab. It's going to be a really wide camera, which is how we create this very extremely stretched out sort of nebulous effect. It creates a sense of greater speed. We just need to be closer to the actual astronaut. So in the coordinates, we can adjust the Y position and Z position to be closer and behind like this. About 60 for Y and -40 for the Z position, and then the rotation pitch was angled down at -10. So at 0 it looks like this. Let's look down a bit to -10 degrees. And this was the final camera angle. We can see our astronaut is animated, but after a certain point completely stops moving. So let's go to timeline these are the keyframes driving the astronaut animation. So the total timeline is 16 seconds. So what I am going to do is extend these original keyframes, which currently come up to 3 seconds and 17 frames. We are going to extend them to go up to 4 seconds. So if you select the whole track with the parent up here, it's going to select all the rest. And then grab this bit here. You can actually stretch out or shrink keyframes to make them play slower or faster. So moving them up to 4 seconds is just going to be slightly slower than before. Make sure this is right on 4 seconds. It also means we can repeat this section because it is looped. A lot of the animations from Mixamo are looped as you download them. So we can just repeat that. Click on the keyframes again, and in the track properties after, this should be set to repeat. And if I open up one of these tracks, as we change the number of repetitions represented by this black line, we want to extend this to 16 seconds like that. And because it was 4 seconds to begin with, it's going to fit 4 times into this timeline, the original run of keyframes, actual keyframes, and then this repetition we see. And this is happening to all of the tracks that we have selected prior. So now when we go back to this, the animation is going to continue and play all the way to the end of our setup. To finalize the animation, we're going to have to clean up this scrunched backpack because that doesn't really look good there at all. So we can find that part. It's this gears on the astronaut. We need to make a copy. Let's solo the copy. Go to point mode and it's going to jump up to here. So let's go to the top view and I have the lasso selection. I'm going to get that part of the model, and this selection is going all the way through to some stuff I can't see. So when I go back to this view, you see it selected all the points. Let's delete this and go back to the astronaut again. So we need the gears which still have the backpack. That's the original one. So I did this a bit backwards. I should have deleted it off the original, but it's okay. Let's isolate that. Go to point mode. And this time we are going to remove the front part. So everything else but the oxygen pack. And that's it. We can go back to model mode and live selection, bring everything back once again. What we want to do now is to remove these gears from the skin. That's what's holding this character together along with the bones to create the animation, except here it's just crunching it too much. So when we do that, you see it jumps back to its original position and it's not being deformed. So now we want to take this and place it back onto the astronaut. But first, let's go to Mesh, Axis and Axis Center and execute to bring back the anchor point to the middle of this object. So it's going to be easier to rotate it down by 90 degrees and then move it to roughly where it's supposed to be. These belts at the back here are supposed to click into this angled section here. So something like that. Maybe that's too sloped. Let's bring it up by 5 degrees and then move it up. About there should be pretty good. The problem is that when this moves, it's not moving with the rest of the body. But if we go into the rig and find the spine, which is directly below, spine number 2, we could put the gears underneath that. So when that moves, it's now going to move the backpack with it. So it's not a 100% perfect solution, but I think it works okay here. So with that fix, we have completed the setup. I have re-enabled the cloner, and we're just going to preview this one time in full just to see if everything's working as it's supposed to. So that glitch, we can avoid it by starting at frame number 1. Let's go to the end, and there we go. The reason, by the way, that frame is going to get cut out and it's not going to be an issue is because if it was working like how it's supposed to, you know, if this spline wasn't broken at the beginning, that initial frame would be the same as the last one, because that's how the looping works, right? What the camera sees at the beginning is identical to what it sees at the end. So what this means is that if we were to play back the loop on a timeline back to back, that first and last frame would be actually repeated every time the loop plays. So we actually do want to get rid of one of them anyway for a more continuous loop where we are not doubling up on that first or last frame. So hopefully that makes sense, but either way, cutting out that first frame is not going to be a problem.